The forest on Cathara Prime was unlike anything Hyun-tae had ever seen before. The trees glowed with soft blue and green light, and the ground beneath his feet was spongy and warm. He had been walking alone for 3 hours now, following the marking on his map. His mission was simple: to collect samples of plants and minerals from this remote area. No one else was with him, no weapons, just a man in a protective suit and a backpack full of tools. Hyun-tae was not a soldier. He was a scientist and explorer. He loved this kind of work, being alone in nature, discovering new things. The base where he worked was far behind him now, hidden by the thick plants and strange purple clouds that floated above the forest. Out here, he felt free. The smell came first. It was a sharp metallic smell that made his nose wrinkle. Blood. Fresh blood. Hyun-tae knew this smell from his training. Something had just been killed nearby. His heart beat a little faster, but he was not afraid. He had studied the creatures on this planet. He knew how they hunted. He decided to move away from the smell to stay safe. But before he could walk more than a few steps, the sky above him went dark. The shadow was enormous. Hyun-tae looked up and froze. A creature was descending from above, its massive wings spread wide like the sails of a ship. This was a drakir. He had seen pictures and videos, but nothing had prepared him for the real thing. The creature was at least 4 times the size of a human. Its scales were dark red and black, shining like metal in the strange light of the forest. Teeth like daggers showed when it opened its mouth. The drakir landed about 20 meters away from Hyun-tae. Its golden eyes locked on him immediately. The creature lifted its nose and sniffed the air. Hyun-tae understood what was happening. The beast was smelling the blood, and it was wondering if Hyun-tae was the prey. Then something changed in the forest. More shadows appeared above. 5 more drakirs descended, circling Hyun-tae like he was the thing they hunted. The largest one, the first one that had landed, took a slow step forward. Its claws scraped against the glowing ground. Hyun-tae's mind raced. He could not run. Drakirs were fast, much faster than humans. He could not fight. He was alone against 6 apex predators. He should have been terrified. By all logic, he should have been trying to call for help on his radio. Instead, something strange happened inside his head. He became very calm. Hyun-tae looked at the largest drakir. He studied the creature carefully. The drakir was watching him with intelligence in those golden eyes. This was not a mindless beast. This was a thinking being. It was waiting to see what the human would do. Very slowly, Hyun-tae reached into his backpack. The drakirs tensed, ready to attack. But Hyun-tae's movements were careful and calm. He pulled out a piece of raw meat. He had brought it for meals during his long exploration. He placed the meat on the glowing ground between him and the lead drakir. The creature's nostrils flared, the smell of the fresh meat mixed with the blood already on the air. All 6 drakirs focused on the food. The largest one tilted its great head, studying this strange action. Hyun-tae sat down on a nearby rock. He placed his backpack beside him. He kept his eyes on the lead drakir and did something that should have gotten him killed. He smiled. "Relax," Hyun-tae said, his voice calm and steady. "It is only my meal. There is plenty. You do not need to hunt me." The drakir could not understand the words. Human language meant nothing to a creature that communicated through clicks, roars, and chemical signals. But something in Hyun-tae's voice, something in his calm body language, seemed to reach the creature anyway. The lead drakir took another step forward. Its head was now only 2 meters from where Hyun-tae sat. The scientist could feel the heat coming off the creature's massive body. He could smell the wild, metallic scent of the drakir's blood and scales. Every part of his brain was screaming at him to run, to hide, to do something. But Hyun-tae did not move. He kept smiling. He kept his voice soft. "I know you are hungry," he said. "I know you smell blood. But I am not hunting. I am not your enemy. I am just a human, trying to understand your world." The Drakir lowered its great head to the meat on the ground. Its nostrils flared again. The creature was breathing in the scent deeply. Then, in one quick motion, it consumed the meat in a single bite. The other 5 Drakirs moved closer, their interest drawn by the food that had just disappeared. But the lead Drakir turned its massive body to face them. A low rumble came from deep in its chest. It was a warning. The other creatures stopped. The lead Drakir turned back to Hyun-tae. For a moment that stretched out like an eternity, the human and the apex predator looked at each other. Hyun-tae could see intelligence in those golden eyes. He could see something else, too, curiosity. The Drakir made a clicking sound, a series of chirps and growls that echoed through the forest. The other creatures responded with their own clicks. It seemed like they were talking to each other, debating something about this strange human and this strange situation. Then slowly, the lead Drakir turned away. Its massive wings spread open, the membranes between the bones glowing with a faint bioluminescence. The creature launched itself into the air with surprising grace for something so large. The other 5 followed, their wings beating the thick air of the forest. In moments, they were gone. Hyun-tae sat alone again in the glowing forest. His heart was still racing. His hands were shaking a little. He had just survived an encounter with the most dangerous creature on Cathara Prime. And he had done it not with weapons or strength, but with calm and intelligence. He looked at the spot where he had placed the meat. It was gone, of course. The Drakir had taken it. The alpha predator had accepted the offering of food. It was a small moment, but somehow, Hyun-tae felt like it meant something important. He did not know it then, but that moment in the forest would change everything. That single act of calm in the face of terror would open a door between 2 species. It would challenge everything both humans and Drakirs thought they knew about each other. But for now, Hyun-tae sat on the rock in the alien forest and simply tried to stop shaking. He checked his suit to make sure nothing was damaged. He made sure his tools were still intact. And then slowly, he stood up. He decided to head back to the base. He had learned enough for one day. He had seen enough. And he had a story that no one was going to believe. As he walked back through the glowing forest, the sound of Drakir wings echoed above the trees. The creatures were still circling, still watching. Hyun-tae felt their eyes on him, following him, but they did not attack. The predator dragons had smelled blood, and the human had simply said, "Relax." And somehow, in that moment, 2 worlds had moved one step closer to understanding each other. Dr. Minra did not believe the story at first. She sat in the meeting room with her arms crossed, listening to Hyun-tae describe his encounter with the Drakirs. Around her sat other scientists and military personnel. Everyone was silent, waiting to hear what Minra would say. "You expect us to believe," Minra said slowly, "that 6 apex predators decided not to eat you because you offered them 1 piece of meat?" Hyun-tae nodded. He was calm. He had expected this reaction. "Yes, that is what happened." "That is not how predators work," said Commander Park-soo, a military officer with a hard face. "Predators see prey. They hunt. They eat. There is no negotiation. There is no logic in what you are describing." "Unless," said Ji-woo, the linguistics expert, "the Drakirs are more intelligent than we thought. Unless they can recognize a non-threatening action and respond to it." "Or," said Minra, her eyes narrowing as she looked at Hyun-tae, "he got very lucky." Hyun-tae shrugged. "Perhaps, but I did not feel lucky. I felt like something was happening, something important." The meeting continued for another hour, but nothing was decided. The commanders and officials seemed divided. Some wanted to increase security and weapons around the base. Others wanted to study the Drakirs more carefully. A few, like Ji-woo, wanted to attempt contact. In the end, It was decided that Hyun-tae would return to the same location 3 days later. This time, there would be cameras and recording equipment hidden in the trees. They would document what happened. If the Drakeers returned, they would see it. For 3 days, Hyun-tae prepared. He was not nervous. Something inside him told him that the Drakeers would come back. They would remember him. They would remember the meal. On the 3rd day, he walked into the forest again. This time, he carried more meat, much more meat. He had convinced the base's food stores to give him what he needed. The officials did not understand why, but they gave it to him anyway. The clearing where he had met the Drakeers was quiet. The glowing plants cast their soft blue light on the spongy ground. Hyun-tae found a flat area near the center of the clearing. He had brought wood. He had brought tools. He had a plan that most people would think was insane. He was going to make a fire. Building a fire in the alien forest was not easy. The wood on Cathara Prime did not burn the way Earth wood did. But Hyun-tae was patient. He arranged the wood carefully. He used special chemicals from his pack to help it catch. And slowly, a flame grew. The smoke rose into the air, carrying the scent of burning matter up into the sky. Hyun-tae sat beside the fire and waited. He was not alone. He knew that Min-ra and the others were watching from the hidden cameras. He knew that Park Soo was probably ready to send soldiers if anything went wrong. But Hyun-tae felt calm. The sun was starting to set when he heard them. The clicking sounds came first, a series of short, sharp noises from above, then the shadows. The massive shapes of the Drakeers appeared against the darkening sky. There were 5 this time, but Hyun-tae recognized the lead one. It was the creature with the scarred face. Hyun-tae had decided to call it Scar in his mind. The Drakeers landed in a circle around Hyun-tae. They were more cautious this time, keeping their distance, but they did not attack. They simply watched. Hyun-tae pulled out a large piece of raw meat. He held it over the fire, not close enough to burn it, but close enough to warm it. The heat would change the color of the meat. It would change the smell. All 5 Drakeers moved slightly closer. Their golden eyes were fixed on the meat. Hyun-tae turned the meat slowly, carefully. He was showing them what he was doing. He was teaching them. After several minutes, the outside of the meat was no longer raw. It was darker, cooked on the outside, but still raw in the middle. He pulled it away from the fire and let it cool for a moment. Then he placed it on a flat stone on the ground. Scar stepped forward. The great creature's head lowered over the meat. Its nostrils flared. Then, carefully, it picked up the meat with its mouth and bit down. Something changed in the Drakeer's golden eyes. It was hard to describe, but Hyun-tae could see it. The creature was experiencing something new. The taste was different from raw meat. The texture was different. The flavor had changed. Scar made a series of clicking sounds, excited noises that seemed to express pleasure. The other Drakeers called back, asking questions, wanting to know what their leader was eating. Hyun-tae realized he had not planned for this. He had brought meat for 1 or 2 Drakeers, not 5. He had only enough to cook a few more pieces before his supply ran out. But that was all right. Because as Hyun-tae watched, something remarkable happened. Scar took another piece of meat from Hyun-tae's pile and moved it closer to the fire. The creature seemed to be trying to copy what Hyun-tae had done. It was not skilled. It nearly let the meat fall into the flames. But the Drakeer was attempting to cook. Over the next hour, Hyun-tae cooked meat for all 5 Drakeers. Each one tried the prepared food. Each one seemed to prefer it to raw meat. And slowly, they seemed to understand what Hyun-tae was trying to show them. When the last piece of meat was gone and the fire was dying down, the Drakeers did not leave. They sat in a circle around Hyun-tae, clicking and calling to each other in their strange language. Scar especially seemed reluctant to go. The great creature reached out one massive claw and lightly touched Hyun-tae's shoulder. It was gentle, careful not to pierce the suit. Then Scar made a clicking sound that seemed almost like a question. The creature's golden eyes looked directly into Hyun-tae's eyes. Hyun-tae reached up and touched the scarred face of the Drakir, right where the old wound cut across its scales. "I know," he said quietly. "I know you are trying to understand. That is good. That is very good." Scar pulled away slowly. The creature spread its massive wings and launched itself into the air. The other four followed, their forms disappearing into the darkening sky above the glowing forest. Hyun-tae sat by the dying fire, his heart full. He did not know that back at the base, Dr. Minra was watching the video recording with her hand over her mouth. He did not know that the scientists were arguing about what they had just seen. He did not know that this moment would change the entire direction of human exploration on this planet. For Hyun-tae, there was only the memory of the Drakir's gentle touch and the understanding that had passed between them. Something important had happened here. Something that transcended the normal rules of predator and prey. A connection had been made. A bridge had been built. And it had been built, of all things, with fire and food. The invitation came through a Drakir messenger, or at least that is what everyone assumed. A young Drakir, smaller than the others and with more curiosity in its eyes, landed near the human base and dropped something on the ground. When the soldiers approached carefully, they found it was a piece of carved bone with markings on it. Ji-woo, the linguistics expert, spent hours studying the patterns. He believed they were directions to the Great Hollow. Hyun-tae knew what it meant immediately. The Drakers were inviting him to their home. They were inviting him to meet their people. The decision to go was not difficult for him, but it took much arguing with the base commanders to get permission. "You will be outnumbered thousands to one," Commander Park-soo said, his face red with anger. "You will be alone among predators in their territory. This is suicide." "Or," said Dr. Minra, who had become something of an ally to Hyun-tae after watching the videos, "it is the most important diplomatic moment in human history." In the end, Hyun-tae was given permission to go, but not alone. Minra insisted on coming, hidden at a distance with Ji-woo and recording equipment. They would monitor everything. If there was danger, they would call for rescue. The journey to the Great Hollow took 2 days. Hyun-tae followed the markings on the bone. The forest grew denser as he moved deeper into Drakir territory. The glowing plants became brighter. The air grew hotter and more humid. He could hear the sounds of Drakirs all around him, clicking and calling to each other. Then, suddenly, the forest opened up. The Great Hollow was an enormous natural canyon carved into the planet itself. The walls rose up so high that Hyun-tae had to crane his neck to see the top, and everywhere, on every surface, there were Drakirs, hundreds of them, thousands of them. They covered the canyon walls like insects on a log. Some were sleeping, some were eating, some were flying through the open space above. Hyun-tae felt very small. A familiar clicking sound made him look up. Scar was descending from above, the scarred creature gliding down on its massive wings. Behind Scar came a Drakir that Hyun-tae had not seen before. This one was smaller, with scales that were a lighter shade of red. It moved with grace and intelligence. Hyun-tae realized this must be a female. The female landed first, her golden eyes studying Hyun-tae carefully. She was smaller than Scar, but no less impressive. Her scales seemed to shimmer in the light of the canyon. Scar landed beside her and made a series of clicking sounds. The female responded with her own clicks. They seemed to be having a conversation about Hyun-tae. Finally, the female approached. She did what Scar had done before. She reached out and touched Hyun-tae's shoulder, her great claw gentle and careful. Then she made a clicking sound that seemed to contain a question. Hyun-tae realized what she was asking. She wanted to know his name. "Hyun-tae," he said simply. The female made a sound that might have been laughter. It was a series of high-pitched clicks and chirps. Other drakirs nearby made the same sound. It seemed like his name was causing amusement among them. Scar made another clicking sound, sharper and more commanding. The female responded with what might have been annoyance, but she did seem to accept whatever instructions Scar had given. The female looked at Hyun-tae again and made a clicking sound that seemed almost like an introduction. Hyun-tae did his best to repeat the sound. It came out as a garbled mess of human phonetics and strange clicks. But the female seemed pleased by his effort. She made the sound again, and this time she touched her own chest. Her name. She was giving him her name. Keth Allah, Hyun-tae tried to say. It was close. The female made another clicking sound that might have been approval. Over the next hour, Hyun-tae was introduced to the Drakir society in a way that no human had ever experienced. Kethala took him under her care. She showed him where the Drakirs slept. She showed him where they stored their kills. She showed him the pools where they bathed. She showed him the nest areas where young Drakirs learned to fly. And everywhere they went, Hyun-tae tried to communicate. He pointed at things and said the words in human language. The Drakirs made their clicking sounds. Slowly, a strange sort of understanding began to form. But then came the moment that changed everything. Keth Allah brought Hyun-tae to an open area in the canyon. There was a rocky outcropping here, flat and suitable for standing. Keth Allah made a series of clicking sounds that seemed to summon others. Soon, dozens of Drakirs had gathered around them in a circle. Hyun-tae realized what was happening. He was being presented to them. He was being shown to the Drakir people as something important, something worthy of attention. A large male Drakir, even bigger than Scar, stepped forward. This must be a leader, Hyun-tae thought, the great creature's golden eyes fixed on the human. For a long moment, nothing happened. The Drakir simply studied Hyun-tae, as if trying to understand what he was. Then the creature did something unexpected. It lowered its great head in what looked like a gesture of respect. All the other Drakirs made clicking sounds. It seemed like an acknowledgement, a recognition of something. Hyun-tae understood that something significant had just happened. Keth Allah made a clicking sound and gestured with her claw toward the edge of the canyon. She wanted Hyun-tae to come with her. They walked together to the edge of the great hollow. From here, Hyun-tae could see for hundreds of kilometers across the landscape of Cathara Prime. The glowing forests spread out like a green and blue blanket. In the distance, mountains rose up against the sky, and somewhere out there was the human base. Keth Allah made a soft clicking sound. It was different from the others, quieter, almost gentle. She touched Hyun-tae's shoulder again, and this time the gesture felt like friendship. Hyun-tae realized that something extraordinary was happening. The Drakirs were beginning to see him not as food, not as prey, not as an enemy. They were beginning to see him as something else entirely, as someone worthy of respect, as someone who might belong in their world. And Hyun-tae, standing on the edge of the great hollow, with a Drakir friend beside him, realized that he had just witnessed the birth of something new, a connection between two species, a bridge built not with weapons or treaties, but with food, fire, and the simple act of trying to understand each other. The future was uncertain, but in that moment, under the alien sky of Cathara Prime, it felt full of possibility. The diplomatic vessel Han Buell arrived at Cathara Prime on a Tuesday morning. The ship was massive, designed for military operations and official negotiations. On board was Commander Park Soo, who had received new orders from Earth. The message was clear. Establish human dominance over the Drakir species. Control the situation. Do not let humans become victims to these creatures. Park Soo was not a cruel man. He simply believed in military strategy. He believed that peace came from strength. He had seen conflicts across the galaxy, and he knew that weakness invited violence. In his mind, What Hyun-tae had done with the Drakeers was not peaceful contact. It was weakness, and weakness would eventually get humans killed. The first thing Park Soo did was order Hyun-tae to stop all contact with the Drakeers immediately. The second thing he did was establish a perimeter around the human base. Weapons were installed. Soldiers were stationed. Hyun-tae's dreams of peaceful coexistence were put on hold. At the base, Hyun-tae sat in the officers' mess with his friend Yoon-ji, a communications specialist who had become close to him over the past months. Yoon-ji was worried about him. "You should not challenge Park Soo," she said, keeping her voice low so others would not hear. "He has power here now. He has the military behind him. If you keep trying to contact the Drakeers, he will make your life very difficult." Hyun-tae stirred his food with his fork, not really eating. "I have already made contact with them. The relationship is already formed. Park Soo cannot stop what has already started." "He can try," Yoon-ji said. "And if the Drakeers attack because of his weapons and soldiers, you will be blamed. They will say you started this conflict. They will say your peaceful approach was a mistake." Hyun-tae looked at his friend. Yoon-ji was intelligent and practical. She was right about the danger, but he could not give up. He could not let fear and military strategy destroy what he had built with the Drakeers. "Come with me," he said suddenly. "Come to the next meeting with the Drakeers. See what I see. Then you will understand why Park Soo is wrong." Yoon-ji hesitated. Going against Park Soo's orders could end her career. But she also trusted Hyun-tae. She had seen his recordings. She had read the reports. Something extraordinary was happening, and she wanted to be part of it. "All right," she said. "I will come." 3 days later, Hyun-tae and Yoon-ji made their way to the clearing where the Drakeers often met him. Yoon-ji was nervous. She had a weapons harness under her jacket just in case. Hyun-tae carried no weapons at all. The Drakeers arrived as the sun began to set. There were 8 of them this time. Scar was there, and Keth Allah. There was the great leader Hyun-tae had seen in the Great Hollow, and there were several others that Hyun-tae recognized from his visits. When they saw Hyun-tae, they landed and approached, but when they saw Yoon-ji, they stopped. The Drakeers clicked and called to each other, confused by the presence of a second human. Yoon-ji's hand moved toward her weapon, but Hyun-tae grabbed her wrist gently. "Do not," he said. "Trust me." Keth Allah approached Yoon-ji. The female Drakeer was curious. She had never seen another human up close. Her golden eyes studied every detail of Yoon-ji's face, her suit, her appearance. Yoon-ji was terrified. The creature was so large, so powerful. One of its claws could tear her apart. But she stood still. She did what Hyun-tae had taught her. She stayed calm. Keth Allah reached out and touched Yoon-ji's hair. The gesture was gentle and curious. It was the touch of someone trying to understand something new. "Her name is Keth Allah," Hyun-tae said quietly. "She is intelligent. She is curious. She is not a mindless predator." Keth Allah made a clicking sound. It was almost like she was responding to her name. She pulled her claw away from Yoon-ji and made a series of complex clicking sounds. The other Drakeers responded. Then something remarkable happened. Keth Allah went to one of the other Drakeers, a younger male, and gestured for him to bring something. The young Drakeer flew up to the nearby trees and returned with a kill, a fresh animal from the forest. He dropped it on the ground. Hyun-tae's eyes widened. He understood what was happening. Keth Allah was teaching. She was showing the others how to interact with humans. She took the raw kill and brought it to Hyun-tae. Then she made a gesture pointing to the fire-starting materials that Hyun-tae had brought. Hyun-tae realized what she wanted. He quickly built a fire while Keth Allah watched. When the flames were strong, he took the kill and began to prepare it, cooking the meat slowly as he had done so many times before. But this time was different. This time, Keth Allah was helping him. The great female Drakir was learning to cook. Her taloned hands were clumsy and not made for such delicate work, but she was trying. She was following his movements, copying his techniques. The other Drakirs watched, clicking with what seemed like excitement. They were seeing something new. They were seeing one of their own learn to do something that humans could do. When the meat was finally cooked, Hyun-tae offered pieces to all 8 Drakirs. Each one consumed the prepared food eagerly, and each one made pleased clicking sounds. Yoonji watched this entire exchange in silence. Slowly, her fear was fading, replaced by wonder. She was watching the birth of a new kind of civilization. She was watching 2 species learn to communicate not through weapons or dominance, but through the simple act of sharing food. When the meal was finished and the Drakirs were preparing to leave, Scar approached Hyun-tae one more time. The scarred creature made a sound that Hyun-tae had heard before. It was a question, but different somehow. It sounded almost like a plea. Kethala moved beside Scar. She touched the scarred creature's face gently with her claw. Then she made a clicking sound that seemed almost like comfort. Hyun-tae understood. The Drakirs were worried too. They were worried about the weapons and soldiers at the human base. They were worried about conflict. They wanted peace as much as the humans did, but they did not know if peace was possible. "It will be all right," Hyun-tae said, even though he was not sure it was true. "We will find a way." Kethala made a soft clicking sound. Then all 8 Drakirs spread their great wings and launched themselves into the sky, disappearing into the darkness above the glowing forest. Yoonji finally spoke. "I understand now," she said quietly. "I understand why you believe in them. They are not monsters. They are just like us. They want to survive. They want to understand. They want to belong." Hyun-tae nodded. "Yes. And now I need you to help me convince Park Soo of the same thing." Yoonji looked at her friend, and she knew that the real battle was just beginning. Not with weapons, but with words. Not with dominance, but with truth. She had just seen something that should change everything. Now she had to make others see it too. The task seemed impossible, but as she walked back to the base beside Hyun-tae, she felt a spark of hope. Because she had learned something important that evening. 2 species that should have been enemies could become something more. All it took was the willingness to try. The negotiation room was cold and formal. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the base and into the alien forest beyond. On one side of a long table sat the human leadership. Commander Park Soo was there, along with Dr. Min-ra, military advisors, and scientists. On the other side, there were no Drakirs. Instead, there were 3 large screens displaying video feeds from the Great Hollow. The Drakir leaders had agreed to communicate through screens rather than in person, for safety reasons. No one wanted an armed conflict if something went wrong. Hyun-tae sat between the 2 groups, representing the bridge that had been built. Kethala's face was visible on the largest screen, and beside her was the great leader that Hyun-tae had met in the canyon. The older Drakir leader spoke first, a series of clicking and chirping sounds that seemed to fill the room. Jiwoo, working with advanced translation software, provided the interpretation. "The Drakir leader says that his people have no interest in war. They wish only to understand what the humans want." Park Soo leaned forward. "Tell them that humans want access to the planet's mineral resources. We want to establish trading routes. We want to build settlements. We want to live here peacefully. But we will defend ourselves if threatened." The message was relayed through the screens. The Drakir leader made a series of complex clicking sounds. Kethala joined in, and it was clear they were debating something important. Finally, the great leader spoke again. "They agree to give humans access to the Western territories," Jiwoo translated, "but they want something in return." "What do they want?" Park Soo asked, his hand instinctively resting on the arm of his chair. The answer came not from Ji-Woo's translation device, but directly from Keth Allah. She leaned close to the camera on her side, and her golden eyes looked directly at Hyun-tae. She made a clicking sound that Hyun-tae had heard before. "She is asking for knowledge," Hyun-tae said quietly. "They want to learn. They want humans to teach them." "Teach them what?" asked Dr. Minra. Hyun-tae thought for a moment. He understood what Kethala truly wanted. The Drakirs had been predators for millions of years. They hunted. They survived. But they had never truly advanced beyond that. The cooking, the preparation of food, the ritual and intention behind it, that was the beginning of something new for them. They wanted civilization. They wanted culture. They wanted to become more than just apex predators. "Everything," Hyun-tae said. "Agriculture, medicine, art, music, language, all the things that make us human, all the things that separate us from pure survival." Park Soo looked at Hyun-tae like he had lost his mind. "You want to teach apex predators human culture? That is insane. That is asking for trouble." But Minra was nodding slowly. "Actually, it is not insane. It is logical. If the Drakirs have the capacity for culture, for learning beyond mere survival, then educating them could create a real partnership, not dominance by either side, but genuine cooperation." The debate went on for hours. Park Soo argued for caution and control. Minra argued for partnership and education. Hyun-tae sat quietly, listening. Finally, Ji-Woo spoke. "May I suggest something? What if we start small? What if we have a limited exchange program? Some Drakirs come to the human base to learn. Some humans go to the Great Hollow to teach. We monitor everything carefully. We see if it works." Park Soo did not like it. But he also understood that the Drakirs were not going to simply accept human dominance. If conflict was to be avoided, some compromise had to be reached. After another hour of debate, he finally agreed. The screens flashed with the translation of the proposal. The Drakir leader made excited clicking sounds. Kethala's eyes seemed to shine with something like joy. Over the next 3 months, the exchange program began. Young Drakirs came to the human base and learned in special classrooms designed for their size. They learned mathematics from screens and instructors who were careful never to make sudden movements. They learned basic human language through patience and repetition. And they learned cooking from Hyun-tae, who had become the primary cultural ambassador between the two species. Keth Allah was the star student. She was intelligent and motivated. She learned faster than the other Drakirs, and more importantly, she had a gift for communication. She seemed to understand not just the words humans were trying to teach, but the intent behind them. She asked questions. She made connections. She was doing more than learning. She was building bridges in her mind between two entirely different ways of understanding the world. Hyun-tae spent most of his days working with Kethala. They prepared meals together, experimented with new cooking techniques, and talked about life and philosophy. Kethala wanted to understand why humans valued beauty and art alongside survival. She wanted to know what purpose music served. She asked if Drakirs could create art with their claws and voices. "Of course they can," Hyun-tae told her. "Any thinking being can create beauty. You just have to find your own way of doing it." On the human side of the exchange, soldiers and scientists went to the Great Hollow to live among the Drakirs. They learned about Drakir history, their natural capabilities, their ways of hunting and living. They began to see that the creatures were far more complex than anyone had imagined. Then came the day of the treaty signing. It took place in a neutral ground between the base and the Great Hollow, a natural clearing with enough space for both humans and Drakirs to gather. The treaty was called the Cathara Accord, and it was unlike any agreement in galactic history. It was not about trade routes or territory, though those things were included. The foundation of the treaty was cultural exchange and mutual education. Both species agreed to share knowledge, to learn from each other, and to work toward a future where humans and Drakirs could live side by side, not as conquerors and conquered, but as partners. Hyuntae stood beside Kethala as Commander Park Soo signed the document with an electronic stylus. The great Drakir leader stepped forward and placed his claw on the stone tablet where the treaty would be carved in the Drakir language as well. Park Soo extended his hand to the Drakir leader. For a moment, the two leaders simply looked at each other, a human and a Drakir. Predator and prey no longer, but partners. The Drakir leader extended his massive claw and gently grasped Park Soo's hand. It was an awkward gesture, the human hand tiny against the scales and talons, but it was unmistakably a gesture of respect and agreement. A cheer went up from the humans. The Drakirs made a series of clicking sounds that seemed to express celebration and relief. Hyuntae felt Kethala's claw touch his shoulder. He looked up at his friend and saw what he had come to recognize as a smile, a clicking, chirping expression of happiness. "We did it," he said. Kethala made a soft, clicking sound. Then she said something in human language that she had been practicing. The words were not perfect, but they were clear. "We did it together." That night, the humans and Drakirs shared a feast. The fire burned bright in the clearing as both species gathered around it. The Drakirs brought their hunts, which the humans helped them prepare in the way they had learned. The humans brought foods from their stores, which they prepared with Drakir ingredients. The meal was a mixture of both cultures, a symbol of what they were beginning to create together. Hyuntae watched as humans and Drakirs sat together, sharing food and in their own ways, sharing stories. The language barrier was still there, but it was becoming less of a wall and more of a challenge to overcome. The future was uncertain, but it felt bright with possibility. The treaty had been signed, the bridge had been built. Now came the real work, the work of making two civilizations into one shared world.